In a broad sense, the vast majority of horror films end up with at least one survivor making it out alive. On the other hand of the equation though, there are those films where the Grim Reaper comes a-calling for each and every central protagonist on offer in suitably gnarly ways. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 horror movies that killed every main character. Number 10, The Return of the Living Dead. Once writer John Russo and director George A. Romero parted ways following Night of the Living Dead, it was Russo who retained the legal rights to the Living Dead name. And thus, while old George went off to do Dawn of the Dead, Russo would eventually bring in Dan O'Bannon to helm 1985's The Return of the Living Dead. And despite being quite hilarious, The Return of the Living Dead has an utterly hopeless, depressing ending. The thing is though, the film's unique brand of humor and satire means that you almost have a feeling that this film couldn't have ended any other way. The ending in question, of course, sees the decision made to nuke the area where the majority of Return of the Living Dead takes place, killing any and all characters in the process. And even if anyone somehow happened to survive the nuclear assault, the ensuing acid rain that followed this bomb would make sure to finish off the job. So while audiences spent time getting attached to Bert, Tina, Ernie, and even Tarman, this is all for naught as these characters are killed off with a literal bang. Number 9, 2001 Maniacs. Released in 2005, Tim Sullivan's 2001 Maniacs is a loose remake of 1964's 2000 Maniacs, itself inspired by a musical from the 40s. Headed up by genre favourites Robert Englund, Lynn Shay, Peter Stormare, and Giuseppe Andrews, 2001 Maniacs takes place in the idyllic location of Pleasant Valley, just as this Georgia town is celebrating the American Civil War with its annual Guts and Glory Spectacular. By chance, 6 college kids and a couple of bikers stumble upon Pleasant Valley while the town is prepping for this traditional celebration, and these guests are strategically separated and offed in the process. When 2 of the students escape and inform the law of the chaos and carnage of Pleasant Valley though, they're informed that this town no longer exists and is instead merely a cemetery for 2001 Confederate villagers killed during the Civil War. This pair of would-be survivors start to ride off into the sunset only to end up having their heads lopped off by barbed wire, leaving all the main protagonists dead. Number 8, The Cabin in the Woods. On an extremely loose level, this Drew Goddard picture involves a group of young adults heading out to your generic cabin in the woods. Obviously, it's right there in the title. With it then detailed how said cabin is controlled by a bunch of scientists who drug the group and engineer numerous horror cliches and tropes to play out, all the while these lab technicians place bets on who'll survive and which monsters will rear their heads. From there, it's explained how this is all part of a worldwide ritual, for which the US involvement is to sacrifice the 5 standard slasher movie stereotypes of the virgin, the whore, the jock, the brain, and the jokester. By the end of The Cabin in the Woods though, main protagonist Dana decides that she doesn't want to play along with this game anymore, and she and other survivor Marty opt to destroy themselves, the cabin, and the rest of the world as they sit back to share one last joint. Number 7, See No Evil 2. Jacob Goodnight, aka Glenn Jacobs, aka Kane, may not have hit the level of a Michael Myers, a Jason Voorhees, or a Freddy Krueger when it comes to great horror villains. Yet the big bad of the 2 See No Evil pictures still gave horror hounds plenty to enjoy during his pair of outings. The last of those outings came back in 2014 with Jen and Sylvia Soska's See No Evil 2, and that was a follow-up offering where Citizen Kane himself very much took no prisoners and left no survivors at the end of the film's 19-minute runtime. Back in the 2006 original movie, Goodnight was stabbed in the eye, thrown out of a window, and had his heart impaled on a piece of glass. Still, that didn't stop the hulking presence from coming back for more bloodshed and terror in the sequel, with him awakening in the morgue during the early goings-ons of See No Evil 2. In a slightly questionable move, a group are having a birthday bash at the morgue just as Jacob wakes up, which is incredibly unlucky, and from there the bodies start to pile high as Jacob Goodnight kills everybody in sight as he cleanses them of their sins. Number 6, House LLC. The very premise of House LLC is one that establishes from the get-go that few, if any, are going to make it out alive. Here, the titular Hell House was a haunted tour that took place in the abandoned Abaddon Hotel just outside New York City. The morning after its opening, a total of 15 customers and Hell House staff were found dead, and from there we find a documentary crew exploring this mystery and speaking to the one Hell House staffer who actually survived this tragedy. In the final moments though, it would be revealed that this survivor, Sarah, was actually totally dead, and the documentary crew delving into the Hell House Massacre would likewise find themselves killed off as the movie wrapped up. It may have flown under the radar for some, but Hell House LLC is a pretty effective, chilling movie that's a great way to spend 80 minutes of your time. Number 5. Life. It may not have been the Venom prequel tie-in that some optimists were hoping for, but 2017's Life gave sci-fi horror fans somewhat of a modern-day cult classic. Focused on the Pilgrim 7 probe as it's intercepted by the International Space Station on its way from Mars to Earth, the exciting discovery of an extraterrestrial organism takes a turn for the sinister when this organism, cutely named Calvin by the way, is revealed to be a super smart sentient being that is growing larger and larger in size and intelligence. With Calvin having killed off their crewmates, the finale of the film comes down to Rebecca Ferguson's Miranda North and Jake Gyllenhaal's David Jordan having to stop this seemingly unstoppable beast. The plan here is for Calvin to be lured into an escape pod containing Jordan that's headed into deep space, with North in a different pod that's heading to the safety of the Earth. The jaw-dropping close of Life, though, reveals that North is actually the one hurtled screaming into the unknown of space, while Jordan and Calvin crash land in the sea on Earth and are found by Vietnamese fishermen, allowing for Calvin to presumably devour pretty much the entire population of Earth. Number 4. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning. Is The Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning a good movie? No, absolutely not. But what it does have going for it, though, is a brilliant ending that pulls the rug out from underneath its audience and its main protagonist. To give context to what is admittedly a jumbled, fumbled franchise full of varying canon, The Beginning is a prequel picture to Marcus Nispel's 2003 TCM remake, with the focus on the formative years of Leatherface and his chainsaw-wielding ways. As has so often been the case, this 6th chainsaw offering finds a handful of disposable young adults in the crosshairs of the Sawyer, or in this case Hewitt, family. After these pretty things have been slain one by one, we get to the ever-familiar stage of the film where it's down to the final girl to overcome the odds against the big bad beast who opposes her. That final girl is Jordana Brewster's Chrissy, who makes her escape while Leatherface butchers her boyfriend. Having found a car and headed off to supposed safety, the kicker here is that Chrissy actually has a chainsaw put through her back as we find out that Leatherface has been hiding in the back of the car the whole time. Number 3. The Blair Witch Project. It's hard to put into words just how big a deal the Blair Witch Project was when it first released back in 1999. By the time the film made its way out to the masses, there was a genuine curiosity about whether what audiences were seeing was indeed real footage of real people being really tormented in the very real woods. In terms of the story, though, looking to make a documentary on the purported urban myth of the Blair Witch, Heather, Josh, and Mike's venture into the Burkittsville backwoods saw them disappear one by one. First Josh, then Mike, and finally Heather. While we don't actually see any of the trio killed on camera, the implication is that the Blair Witch is a real entity who has lured Heather, Josh, and Mike into its clutches, which, if so, means that all 3 ended up dead. And this is supported by the sequel Blair Witch as well, which confirms that none of them were ever seen again. Number 2. Unfriended. When done right, a horror movie using modern technology can make for quite the intriguing proposition. I mean, hell, just look how much we bloody loved Horse. The premise of Unfriended is somewhat similar, centering on a group of high school students who are tormented and eventually killed as strange happenings play out during a multi-person Skype chat. This all takes place a year after one of their classmates, Laura Barnes, took her own life after an embarrassing video of her was posted on social media. By the time all is said and done with Unfriended, it's the myth spirit of Laura who has delivered brutal revenge on those she feels has wronged her. Those quote-unquote friends having recorded Laura at her most vulnerable, aka passed out drunk and having shat her pants, then circulated this video across social media for the giggles. This embarrassment is what caused Laura to fatally shoot herself, and she managed to serve up some grim and gory payback by the time Unfriended came to a close, killing all of those responsible, then revealing the ugly truth on Facebook. Number 1. Night of the Living Dead. We started out with George A. Romero's writing partner, so it only makes sense to end on the other side of that coin, because 1968's Night of the Living Dead is right up there as one of the most influential movies in the history of horror. Not only did this Romero picture kickstart the zombie subgenre, albeit with the undead sorts being referred to as ghouls here rather than labelled as zombies, but it also served up a slice of social commentary, and is a clear reference point of cultural change in how it cast Dwayne Jones as one of its leads. Unfortunately for the core characters of Night of the Living Dead, though, they all end up dead by the time the film's closing credits roll. In terms of its basic narrative, Night of the Living Dead sees 7 people battling for their lives, holed up in a Pennsylvania farmhouse as flesh-eating ghouls ghouls circle in on them in the hopes of finding their next meal. Having seemingly survived the undead, plus had to deal with the death and subsequent reanimation of those around him, Dwayne Jones's Ben looks to have been saved at the picture's close, only for him to shockingly be shot and killed after being mistaken for a ghoul.